morning. I'm Katie Resendez, and I'm the Director of Children's Ministry here at UUC Phoenix. This morning, I need people to come down front and sit on the steps if they can. Kiddos, if any of you are willing to join me, I could really use some help. We need some people to act as people. I think it's rude if I say props, right? So as we're settling into place, I want you to remember that the earth is always underneath us, right? So even if we put concrete over it, even if we build buildings on top of it, it's still underneath us. So as you sit or stand or kneel, feel the building under you, and then feel deeper down into those roots. Because the planet underneath us is still there. We have this idea that if you want to get in touch with how we take care of the planet, you need to go out into nature. But y'all, how many of you live in cities? Yeah, most of us, right? Very few of you, though. That's weird. Who do you all live with? Huh. Interesting. But how often when you're walking down the sidewalk do you see grass coming up between the cracks? How many of you, when you go outside this time of year, have to dodge bees that are hanging out in your front yard? But nature doesn't exist in cities, right? That's not true. Nature totally exists in cities. And what we have to think about is that interconnected way we exist. So I want to talk to you about one place and how humans have been there and what it has created. It began as a settlement mostly by Spanish missionaries and then by Mexican farmers, and it was called Rancho La Tahuate. Let's see, I need some people to be Mexican farmers. Chandani, Amelia, Lyndon and Sean, if you would both. So come over here, Jara as well, and make yourself some space. And you can sit down if you want, but take up enough space for your farm. Good. Amelia's got a good big farm. Lyndon and Sean have good farms. Jara's got a great one. Okay, they're farming. And this is beautiful land because it's in Southern California. And it's hot, but it's still fairly close to the ocean. It's still fairly nice. So people who have lots of privilege and ability start to move to that area. And let's say it's the early 1900s, so people with lots of privilege and ability are mostly white. So I need some people to be white migrants. All pointing out your father is a good trick. Come on. Okay, now come live in among these people here. You might want to be on the outskirts, you might want to be right close. Find your plot of land and have a seat. So these people have beautiful homes that overlook farming land. How idyllic and sweet. And they've bought it and paid for it, and so it's theirs. Because another fallacy that humans have is that we can pay for land and then we get to own it, which is a little odd, right? So, as time progresses, a war breaks out in the US, and our country is horrible to black people, specifically in the South. And those two things combined lead to part of what was called the Second Great Migration, but a very specific part. We've before talked about people moving up to Detroit and how we get to Motown music. So instead, let's think about people moving across to California. So we have tons of black families moving across to California to work in war industries. And that means they were working in factories to make weapons, to make vehicles for war. And I know for people here that might not be a job we would choose, but what kind of circumstances might make you want to choose that? Ooh, I hear desperation. What else? Jara, you had a thought. Money? To get a house, right? To know that all this beautiful land is here. Also, if you are being treated horribly, if there's Jim Crow laws affecting everyone who looks like you, you're going to go somewhere where those laws don't exist. And California offered that promise. And so, during the war, we see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of families moving into this same neighborhood. It's about a 10-acre plot. So if you all would move into the farmland as you can, find places that you fit, but remember it's only 10 acres, so you're going to need to make this space smaller. So let's see, if you all would scrunch to about here, and if you all would scrunch this way, about to where Mr. Sam is. How's that feeling? So, in 1950, a man whose name I happily keep forgetting is elected to be chief of police for Los Angeles. And he is horrified because he says in this 10-acre plot, there is more crime than there has ever been before. There's also more people, which means there are more babies, more cheese sandwiches, more mail delivery, everything else. But he focuses on there's more crime. And he actually coins a phrase that we use now, or we hear used now. He coins the phrase the thin blue line. And he says, the only thing preventing people from being victims of crime is the line of law enforcement of people. So, did you see what I did there? What did I call all of them? They were people, and you all were crime, right? He kept this idea and pushed forward this idea that crime is always at the surface and it's about to break free and get you. But if you look at Addie or Yosana, this is not the face of crime. It is the face of a brand new minted 15-year-old, though. Happy birthday. But he started putting a face to crime and saying that you all needed to be protected from crime. So what do you think happened in that land, in that 10-acre plot? Started what? They started fighting, right? They started feeling that pressure. And they start getting more pressure to live closer and closer together. I won't make you do it, but what would happen if I made you be closer and closer together? It would be great if it was cooperative living situations, and a lot of that did happen, but what also happened was the hospitals were outside of this 10 acres. The grocery stores were outside, right? So you have very little resources and lots of people. So, in 1965, a young 21-year-old man by the name of Marquette Fry is pulled over for a traffic violation. He is pulled over and calls for help because he knows that in this city and under the LAPD, black men are not safe when the police are around. He calls for help. And the situation goes badly. It's on August 11th, 1965. And what happens is the people in this block respond, and they respond with strength, they respond with anger, and in some situations they respond with violence. But more than anything, they were trying to say, we deserve to live. We deserve to live here where we are not the face of crime, and we don't deserve to be treated as if we are. That began the Watts riots, as lots of us learned about them. How many of you were taught about the Watts riots? Okay, you kids, you are being taught about the Watts uprising. Yes. Because when a community stands up and says, this is not okay, we cannot immediately blame them for their violence. Even for this one incident, Marquette Fry did not start the fight. And that is very clearly recorded. And law enforcement is where it started, but somehow we blame the people of Watts for the riot, right? But if it's you all staking your claim, it's much more of a revolution and much more honest to what happened. The Watts riots were horrible, absolutely terrible, broadcast across the nation, caused mass shutdowns, absolutely devastated this community. You all have your houses, you all have your garden plots in your front yard, the few schools there are. They've been burned or bombed. You have 50% of the housing that you used to have. So now half of you have to live with the other half of you. 34 people were killed during the Watts riots. 23 of them were shot by National Guard, LAPD, or California State Police. So let's take a breath. Remember back to this plot of 10 acres that was farmland, that people loved so much they brought their families there for safety. It is still a beautiful home. 7 years after the Watts Uprising, we see what I will call the best music festival the country has ever seen, and will ever, with Wattstack. And then we see funding come up for arts. Because when you're in desperate times, when life is hard, how many of you at your lowest moments hum to yourself or draw a picture, find yourself trying to dance? Because art flutters inside us. And art is so connected to hope and to healing, and healing ourselves, but also healing the planet. We see mural artists born in the Watts neighborhood. Huge painting districts happen. We see musicians come out at some of the best pop songs that you all are too young to remember, but they're great oldies for you, come out of that area. And we see peace agreements, and the first attempts at trying to formalize a peace agreement with hard neighborhoods, it didn't work. It was not a good idea, but people tried. And actually, there was a Watts peace agreement that was signed in 1992, the night before the Rodney King riots started. So it feels like this piece of land is really important to our country because we keep seeing it hold these things. And as we move through the 90s, we see the schools get funding for poetry. We see painting collectives continue, more and more murals. And Amanda Gorman was born there. Today, Rev. Christine and other folks will reference her work, and I want you to remember that the piece of land that you come from is important, where you sink your roots is important, and all the feet that have been on the land shape what comes after it. Thank you so much.